Good evening. It's Thursday, January 9th. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Maya Trabulsi. We start tonight with a developing story on that plane crash in Iran that took place at the height of tensions with the U.S. Canada's Prime Minister and U.S. officials now say there is growing evidence it was shot down. The plane was a commercial flight operated by Ukraine International Airlines. 176 people died, including dozens of Canadians. No Americans were on board.
The news will undoubtedly come as a further shock to the families who are already grieving in the face of this unspeakable tragedy. We have intelligence from multiple sources, including our allies and our own intelligence. The evidence indicates that the plane was shot down by an Iranian surface-to-air missile. This may well have been unintentional.
Iran's ambassador to the UN says the incident is still being investigated. And this all comes as Congress votes to limit future actions by President Trump. Whitney Wild has tonight's update from Washington.
In the aftermath of a Trump administration briefing on the killing of a high-profile Iranian general, outrage is erupting from both sides of the aisle.
That was insulting. That was demeaning to the process ordained by the Constitution. And I find it completely unacceptable.
They gave us the most general conclusions about threats to the United States, but when it came to any specificity, it just wasn't there.
Now both houses of Congress putting forth their own resolutions to limit President Donald Trump's power to use military force against Iran.
It's an insult to the Constitution. The Constitution said the power to declare war was to be given to Congress. They specifically did not give that power to the president.
Last week, in our view, the administration conducted a provocative, disproportionate airstrike against Iran, which endangered Americans, and did so without consulting Congress.
Some members of the administration and many Republicans contend the president's actions fall under protection from a law signed a week after 9/11, granting presidents the authority to use force against terrorists and the nations that harbor them. The administration has also argued there was an imminent threat that precipitated the strike.
Upon looking at the facts and being in the briefings I've been in, yes, I do believe it was the right decision.
In Washington, Whitney Wild, KPBS News.
And here's a look at today's votes from San Diego's delegation. All Democrats, Susan Davis, Mike Levin, Juan Vargas, and Scott Peters, voted in favor. Republican Duncan Hunter, who will leave Congress next week, did not vote. Now to an issue that's led to a lot of debate here in San Diego. After a string of restrictions imposed by the city, a major scooter company is leaving town. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has reaction from riders.
Lime announced today that these scooters will no longer be in San Diego. They're moving out of the San Diego market. As you can tell here, though, downtown, still a lot of Lime scooters. You can still check them out for now, ride them around, but not for much longer.
Pretty sad to hear that, actually. I use it every day, multiple times a day, and it's my main mode of transportation all around, downtown.
This is Justin Vaichunas. He's a chef who was named Lime's top San Diego rider last year with more than 800 trips.
I think they're really a grateful tool from all ages. I mean, I see businessmen in suits on them. I see people, delivering things.
Others we talked to didn't share his enthusiasm, and some are happy to see the green and white scooters go.
It's a good thing. They need to be banned. Same thing what they did on the boardwalks when people were out the beaches.
I think it's a good thing. Honestly, I don't think they're safe. I think it's difficult. Again, I think it's really it's a bummer because it is a good alternative in some ways as far as carbon footprint and decreasing traffic potentially and people getting to and from. But I just think that it's really hard to enforce safety on them.
I have mixed feelings. I think it's unfortunate for the ones who, really utilize them. But I also think that in terms of, I've had some friends get injured on some of them, which was unfortunate. Right. So, I don't know. Right. If I have to go with one side, I'm sad to see him go.
Lime's operating permit with the city was for 4,500 scooters. In a statement, the company says it made the difficult decision to leave San Diego as it works to become profitable in 2020. Lime claims city regulations last year caused a drastic drop in ridership.
First, there's too many. Now there's a lot of regulations. So there's a place for it. It's just the city and people have to adapt.
Greg Hauser is a juicer for scooter companies.
You pick them up, take them home, charge them, and then just drop them off next morning.
Hauser says he's picked up more than 10,000 over the last 2 years. This is just a side gig for him, but he says the juicing business is dropping off in San Diego.
The juicer market is really not as much as not like it used to be. There's just not enough units, and you could tell because they're leaving.
For those who have money on their Lime accounts still, the company said you can go to their website and request their refund. Lime is the third scooter company to leave in recent months, joining Uber and Skip. The city of San Diego says in a statement that public safety is a top priority, and it will continue to work with scooter companies to modify regulations. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
The county confirms yet another person has been hospitalized for injuries related to vaping. It's one of dozens of cases locally in recent months. Today, the county and San Diego schools are taking new steps to deal with the issue. KPBS reporter Ebony Monet has more.
No apple, cherry, or chocolate-flavored tobacco will be sold in unincorporated parts of San Diego County if Supervisors Diane Jacob and Nathan Fletcher have their way.
We have, and we're facing, a public health crisis in the use of flavored tobacco and these e-cigarette devices.
Today, the supervisors announced details of new ordinances the board is set to consider next Tuesday to crack down on the sale and distribution of flavored tobacco and e-cigarettes.
It would be irresponsible to not operate out of an abundance of caution. It would be irresponsible to not do something we know can have a positive step towards protecting the public, and that's why we're standing here.
The ordinances also include a 1-year moratorium on the sale of vaping devices in unincorporated areas and prohibit smoking in outdoor dining patios.
We also know that flavored products like cotton candy and bubblegum are targeting our children. There is a massive explosion in teen use. 1.5 million new teens started vaping in 2018.
County health officials say locally 43 people have been hospitalized due to vaping-related injuries. Today's call for more regulations comes one day after the San Diego Unified School District announced its lawsuit against the e-cigarette brand Jull Labs, citing its popularity with middle school and high school students. Ebony Monet, KPBS News.
And KPBS Midday Edition has more on San Diego Unified's lawsuit against Jull, including an interview with school board trustee Richard Barrera. You can stream it anytime on the KPBS Midday Edition podcast. Voters in Poway will be asked to approve a $500 million school bond in the March primary. But if history has anything to do with it, it may be a hard sell to get the measure passed. KPBS education reporter Joe Hong explains what the bond would mean for Poway schools and residents.
So you can see things just like normal wear and tear along the walls here.
During his time as principal at Rancho Bernardo High, David Lemaster has seen his classroom buildings fall apart. And while temporary patches and fixes are available, Lemaster said his facilities need a more permanent fix.
My job is to make sure we have a secure campus and that our students are receiving the best educational opportunities. And in order to do that, I really need to have facilities that meet those particular needs.
Rancho Bernardo might get the repairs it needs thanks to a $448 million bond measure on this March's ballot. But the district has had a bad history with bonds. In 2008, the district passed a $105 million bond measure that will end up costing $1 billion with interest because the district had to delay repayment for 20 years. Poway Unified's leadership has completely changed since then, and current Superintendent Marianne Kim Phelps said the district can't wait any longer to improve its facilities.
It's a whole new leadership team. This is a whole new team. And in the time that Poway Unified hasn't gone for a bond in the last decade, other school districts have passed 3 multi-million, multi-billion-dollar bonds. We have aging facilities, portables that are outliving its lifespan, and just facilities that need to be addressed.
The San Diego Taxpayers Association said the district has a strong plan and endorsed the bond, but it did so with serious reservations. The association's president and CEO, Haney Hong, acknowledged the significant concerns of the community, expecting to pay $1 billion over the next several decades.
That's a big bill for a family up in that area. And so we said that we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't tell the taxpayers up there that this bill is coming. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about the current program before you.
Voters in Poway have until March 3rd to decide. Joe Hong, KPBS News.
Help is arriving for firefighters in Australia. In Sydney, American firefighters were cheered by travelers.
I'm just going to wait with the microphone.
In recent days, we have reported on firefighters from Southern California heading to Australia, which is seeing a devastating fire season. It's the first time since 2010 that Americans have been called in. In a way, they're returning the favor. Australian firefighters have helped fight fires here in recent years. A big part of this story is the toll of the fires are taking on wildlife. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson says San Diego Zoo researchers are doing what they can to help.
Out-of-control brush fires are ravaging the Australian backcountry. The flames are consuming homes, habitat, and wild animals. Sydney resident Cheryl Martin is visiting San Diego.
We have a lot of out-of-control fires around the whole east coast and down to South Australia and Kangaroo Island at the moment. The fire sizes vary, but some of the biggest ones are like hundreds of thousands of hectares.
The brush fires have been burning for months, and it hits hard on the country's psyche.
The land and the nature is very important to our people.
Those flames are also threatening the slow-moving koalas. Conservationists estimate that thousands of the eucalyptus-eating marsupials have perished as flames sweep across the countryside.
So out in Australia, they live in the nice eucalyptus trees up in the forest up there, and that's where they feel safe, and that's also where their food is.
San Diego Zoo lead keeper Jennifer Mull says the cuddly animal sleeps 18 to 20 hours a day, and when they do move out of the trees, it's not quick.
What makes them vulnerable is that koalas don't move extremely fast. So when you have a dog and a koala is going through your backyard, the dog can actually outrun the koala. So they can't move very fast.
Mull says they also don't have the stamina to move quickly for a long period of time. She says scientists don't know how well the fuzzy species will do in the aftermath of the fires. That's why some genetically valuable koalas in the Blue Mountain region have been tracked and rescued. Mull says the species may need help to recover.
It's now going to be a lot more dramatic. It's going to be probably pretty devastating, but again, we don't have numbers yet.
While koalas are having a tough time in the wild, they're doing fairly well here. This is the largest breeding colony of koalas outside of Australia. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
And we have more on the Australian fires later in the show. We'll show you an overhead view of some of the fires burning now and how firefighters are approaching them. It's specialized work that requires a lot of planning and coordination. That story is coming up in about 5 minutes.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour was the Ukraine airliner that crashed soon after takeoff, shot down by Iran. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
In Los Angeles today, Joe Biden picked up a key endorsement. Mayor Eric Garcetti, who considered running for president himself, is backing the former vice president. And tonight, candidates for mayor in San Diego will take part in a forum in Little Italy. It's happening at the Firehouse Museum at 6. Barbara Bree, Scott Sherman, and Todd Gloria are taking part. It's the first forum to include Sherman, the only prominent Republican in the race. He announced his campaign a little over a month ago. Governor Gavin Newsom is working on his budget plan, but in the meantime, he's also doing what he can right now to free up more money for homelessness. Doug Johnson has details and reaction to the governor's move.
Governor Gavin Newsom tackling one of the state's biggest problems: homelessness. He issued an executive order which is threefold. It creates the new $1 billion California Access to Housing and Services Fund, including $750 million for investments to reform Medi-Cal for behavioral health. It asks state agencies to find properties which can be used to increase housing and shelters by the end of the month. And it's making 100 camper trailers available with crisis response teams to assist local communities.
There are several key pieces here around both prevention but also treatment that will be really important to California making a significant investment in addressing homelessness.
Michelle Cabrera is the executive director of the California County Behavioral Health Directors Association. She believes the mental health money will make a big difference.
We are supportive of taking another look at the Mental Health Services Act and finding out from the 10, 15 years of experience we have with it, how can we do better by Californians more broadly.
The governor's announcement comes just days after President Trump unleashed a new series of tweets sharply criticizing the homeless situation in Los Angeles and San Francisco and Democratic leadership in California.
California has a tendency to enable bad behavior.
John Capal is president of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, a state government watchdog group. He questions how much of that $1 billion will really go to help the homeless.
We have seen certainly California has a tendency to throw money at a problem without a plan.
While in theory Capal supports this idea, he says often the state pays too much for housing.
The state has already identified that a simple structure for low-income housing for homeless people costs $230,000 per unit. That's way outside the realm of what it should cost to put up temporary housing.
But Cabrera says the need is so desperate, the money has to help.
We have to do something more. The prevention piece, we have to stop people from falling into homelessness in the first place.
And that was Doug Johnson reporting. The governor's executive order also calls for local governments to develop accountability metrics to ensure the plan is working. The Trump administration has been given the green light by a federal appeals court to pull $3.6 billion from the military budget to fund a border wall. The reverse 2-1 ruling from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals comes after a lower court blocked the move last month. The case is still ongoing from here, but this is considered a victory for the president, who wants to divert Defense Department construction funds to build 11 wall projects along the Mexican border. A number of environmental and climate regulations are at risk of being rolled back by the president. Today, President Trump announced he has plans to narrow the scope of National Environmental Policy Act rules. This could include shortened time limits while conducting environmental impact studies on construction projects. Trump says this would give the U.S. an advantage.
The United States will not be able to compete and prosper in the 21st century if we continue to allow a broken and outdated bureaucratic system hold us back from building what we need: the roads, the airports, the schools, everything. Right now, it takes over 7 years, and oftentimes much longer, and 7 years is like record time, to complete approvals for a simple highway, the simplest of them. With today's proposed reforms, we will reduce that number by more than 70%.
Under the administration's proposal, companies would be able to conduct their own environmental reviews. Some say that creates a conflict of interest. The White House will collect public comments for 60 days before making changes to the rules. Earlier, we showed you how San Diegans are helping wildlife affected by the fires in Australia. Now we get a bird's eye view of the firefight from Anna Corin.
A break in the weather. Visibility at 900 metres. This Bell long-range helicopter was finally given clearance to fly.
03 for departure, coastal.
On board, Ian Jauncey, the air attack supervisor for the New South Wales Rural Fire Service.
Because it's been so smoky and everything, they've got very little intel on exactly what the fire's doing.
Yeah.
So they're trying to just get some eyes in the sky.
Since the border fire that crossed from Victoria into New South Wales roared through parts of the far south coast over the weekend, decimating townships, firefighters have been unable to get an aerial view of the monster they're battling until now. With a front stretching more than 60 kilometres wide, it's burned all the way to the sea, engulfing one of Eden's largest employers, the wood chip mill. But as the smoke billowed, and will continue to for weeks, possibly months, this enormous wood pile nearby lies untouched, as does the jetty.
Have protected that well.
The priority for firefighters isn't the massive blaze burning out of control, but rather the smaller fires that have jumped containment lines, posing new threats to homes and townships.
There'll be a lot of hot, smouldering stuff near the edges of the fire there. As soon as that hot, dry wind comes in, it'll activate the fire again and it'll start moving. We're now airborne over the top of the Eden Township. Visibility is a bit better down here. Look, if we can go ahead and please launch and we'll task them from here.
This is the first time the Rural Fire Service has been able to take to the skies here on the far south coast of New South Wales to assess the full extent of the fire damage. Smoke has just been too thick, grounding all aircraft for days. Well, those water-bombing aircraft have just been activated, allowing them to hit those fire hotspots as much as possible before conditions deteriorate on Friday.
2 Black Hawks soon appeared as Ian and pilot Mick Kennedy directed them to nearby dams to fill up their 3,000-litre buckets with water and extinguish identified hotspots.
Turn to your 2 o'clock and you'll see smoke up here on the ridge.
But it was Georgia Peach, the Ericsson sky crane, that made the biggest impact.
It's like clockwork, isn't it?
Sucking up 9,800 litres of seawater at a time, she got to work dousing the flames.
And that's sexy.
After 2 hours in the air, it was back to base to refuel before heading out again.
The fire, from my opinion, is a bit closer than what I originally thought from Eden, so we'll continue to do monitoring and working with the ground crews.
For the specialised pilots who've been part of the aerial attack in this ongoing bushfire crisis, there's nowhere else they want to be.
No one likes to see houses burn, no one likes to see property or life lost, but the guys are here, they just want to help, they just want to get to work.
That was Anna Corin reporting. Weather disasters cost the U.S. $45 billion last year. That's according to new information from the Federal Weather Agency, NOAA. The costs are associated with wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, and more. There were 14 unique events that brought more than $1 billion in damage each. The most expensive was river flooding in the southeast. That totaled $20 billion. Parts of East County might see some rain tonight, but after that, a sunny weekend is in store. Dajia Swad has our forecast.
We're tracking out a low pressure system that is diving through California. It is going to continue to bring in the chance for some showers through tonight. As for San Diego County, really not anticipating a whole bunch of moisture with that, but we will notice some winds picking up as we have another round of disturbances coming into the west coast. Precipitation will be lacking for much of this week. Now mainly clear with a low of 44 tonight. If you're in Oceanside, you're cooling down to 35 and 42 in Borrego Springs. Overnight low Mount Laguna at 28. Headed into that futurecast by 6 p.m. Pacific time. That moisture is to our south of San Diego, rather to the east of San Diego. If you're in Alpine, even into Mount Laguna, still going to be looking at the chance for some rain and shower activity that will continue to move further to the south. Then as we head into that next hour, some of those showers try to inch back a little closer, but most of that will continue to drain to the south. As I mentioned, Friday morning, you're dry and really no concerns for that commute. We are going to see comfortable conditions come back into play, but there will be another storm approaching, and that could bring in some more windy weather for California overall. As we head out to the mountains, if you're headed out to Grand Junction or even into New Mexico, there will be some snow. However, no snow coming our way. We're in that sunshine zone for Borrego Springs, a high of 69 degrees for Friday, 49 in Mount Laguna and 66 in Oceanside. As we continue into the weekend, well, we remain tranquil. Our main focus across the nation in terms of weather will be across the east as a strong low pressure tracks through the northeast and brings in some heavy downpours further south. We'll also be looking at a series of storms coming into the northwest, but for San Diego County, looking beautiful. Highs in the mid 60s and upper 60s for your Saturday and Sunday. That continues through Monday. Needing the sunglasses, no umbrella weather to be seen here in the inland areas. High of 65 for Saturday. We remain a bit cooler as always in the mountains. Windy conditions Saturday, 49 degrees. Mostly sunny conditions and temperatures rise into lower 50s. As you head out to the deserts, you're in the 60s for the next several days with plenty of sunshine. Reporting for KBBS News, I'm your meteorologist, Dajia Swad. Back to you.
There's a tiger coming to Torrey Pines. Tiger Woods, that is. The golf superstar has committed to playing in the upcoming Farmers Insurance Open. Woods is no stranger to Torrey Pines. In fact, he will pursue an 8th tournament victory and the chance to become the PGA Tour's all-time winningest golfer. He has 82 wins and needs only one more victory to move ahead of World Golf Hall of Famer Sam Snead. The Farmers Open begins January 22nd. As you saw earlier, scooters are making headlines again in San Diego, and mobility is a big theme at this year's Consumer Electronics Show. Karen Kafa has some of the highlights from Las Vegas.
Friday show with plenty of showstoppers. Tech fans craning their necks for a better look at Hyundai's flying electric taxi at CES. The first prototype of the four-seater will take to the skies in 2023, Hyundai says. The eventual goal, hailing it through Uber. Bird Scooters with a similar goal in mind, but staying grounded.
Bird is looking to take cars off the road and provide alternative transportation options.
Segway's S-Pod is looking at shorter distances and enclosed areas like malls or airports. The S-Pod is controlled by the touch of a knob and balances itself as it reaches top speeds of 24 miles per hour. With electronics maker Sony delivering a big surprise at the show, an electric concept car, the major automakers know they need to drive innovation beyond the traditional four wheels.
We're talking about mobility and it going into the next level.
Toyota's e-pallets are electric, automated, and can transport things or people, like athletes at the 2020 Summer Olympic Games in Tokyo. Innovation means some iconic brands are getting a fresh spin. Ford showed off its all-electric Mustang SUV hitting the road later this year.
This is taking Mustang after 55 years. It's looking into the future and taking it where we know we need to bring it.
At CES in Las Vegas, for Consumer Watch, I'm Karen Kafa.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Are kids on Medi-Cal getting the care they need? On Morning Edition, how many aren't getting the proper tests for lead poisoning? And on Roundtable, a look at the Republican Party in California and its declining influence in state and local politics. As always, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.